Today, what I want to do is I want to talk with you guys about the biggest pillar inside of your business that honestly, if you can figure out how to build this pillar, that all of your financial problems honestly go away because you're going to become the go-to person in your industry for your particular prospects. Okay, so what I want you to understand is that while you're speaking, whether it's on stage or in a webinar or even in a virtual classroom or on an online course or whatever, when you're teaching and you're speaking to prospects, so people who haven't paid you yet, while you're talking, although they may be very curious and very interested in your content, simultaneously, they have some questions that are going on in the back of their mind. And your job as a communicator is to answer those questions before they're asked verbally. And if you can answer those questions before they're asked verbally, then their biggest obstacles disappear and they end up with no choice but to buy. And I've m- taught multiple times that your job as a communicator and as a salesperson is to get every objection down to one. If their only objection is money, then you've won. If their objection is something other than money, then you've lost. The problem, though, is a lot of times when we think about objections, we just think about objections that our audience is going to have toward us or toward our particular product. And so we have a tendency to put our ego hat on and say, and we look through the sales process of our product through our own personal selfish lens. But that's the problem, because the problem is most of the objections that are in the mind of your prospect actually has nothing to do with you, has to do with them. In fact, I would venture to say that 66% of every objection that they have has nothing to do with you, has nothing to do with your product, has nothing to do with your deliverability. It has to do with them. And so when you look at it that from that perspective, then you understand that your job as a communicator is not just to communicate your program really well, but it's to be able to knock down their limiting beliefs in the process. And so what I want to do is I want to share my screen with you, and I want to show you like the three big limiting beliefs that they have, okay? And so hopefully you guys can see this. So the first one that you have to understand is that they have what's called an internal limiting belief. Okay. And so the internal limiting belief that your prospect has is they're asking, okay, can I do this? Okay. Can I do this? That's a huge limiting belief that they have, because some of the internal objections that will trigger whether this is their limiting belief is things like, I'm not ready, I don't know enough, I've tried before, I'm not really disciplined, maybe I'm not good with technology, I don't have enough time, or I don't have a large audience, or I probably won't finish. Whatever the concepts are, they have a limiting belief. And so the buyer may believe the result is possible for someone else while doubting it's possible for them. And one of the common mistakes that we can make is we try to solve internal doubt with more information. And so one of the things I like to say a lot of times is you cannot solve an emotional struggle with a practical solution, just as you can't solve a practical solution or a practical struggle with an emotional solution. You can't do that. So what you have to understand is this is a an emotional struggle that they have. So more modules, more videos, more resources, lifetime access, bigger, better, whatever, that's not going to help. In fact, what that's going to do is it's actually going to overwhelm them. And so the solution to this particular pillar, this internal pillar, okay, is you have to understand that these people, they're saying can I do this? This is the question that they're asking. Okay, the solution to this can I do this is not more stuff, but actually what it is they need some momentum. Okay, they need what we call a first win. Okay, they need a first win. So momentum is simply forward motion fueled by a series of wins. And so you cannot have a series of wins until you have the first win. So one of the things I want you to think about in your program and in your product is what is something that you can do to be able to help your prospect get a first win. In fact, I like for them to get a first win before they ever pay you. Because if they can get a first win before they pay you, then they're going to logically assume that they can get more wins. Okay. So, you may want to do something like, like for instance, for me, like one of the things I do, like if people are struggling coming into my coaching program, so I'll jump on a call and I'll help them create what's called a flight plan or a one-page offer. We'll do that in as little as 7 days. Or, something I may do, like if they're going to try to buy my six-figure keynote, is like, okay, listen, don't buy it all, but what I want to do is I want to give you a complimentary teaching on this, and what together you and I are going to do is I want to see if we can knock out your first 3 minutes together, right? Because I'm trying to get them a small win. Or, something like, hey, if I'm a fitness coach, I'm going to say, hey, I'm going to give you a quick little instruction. I'm not going to charge you for it. I want you to do it. Then I want you to report back to me in 7 days. And I want you to see how you feel, right? Or, maybe if you're like a marriage coach or whatever, like, you're going to give them, hey, here's what we're going to do. Okay, this week, if you have a difficult conversation, I want you to try this particular tactic and I want you to report back to me on how it went. Okay. Or like if you're a sales coach, you may say, okay, I want you, with your next 5 calls, I want you to ask these 3 questions to see if it helps qualify them and see if you can make a sale or not. Because what you're trying to do when they have an internal belief is you're trying to get them to do this. So let's say that you're in a live room, right? And you're doing a live keynote or whatever. You can actually help some of these people get that first win on the spot. And what's interesting is like when you're doing it in a live room, you don't even have to help them get a win. If you help someone else get a win, they will logically connect the dots that, gosh, if they can do that for them, they could obviously do that for me. So here's some of the questions that you need to be asking about the internal limiting belief for your prospects. Okay, so what does my buyer doubt about themselves? You need to go all in. You need to study this. You need to answer this question from a perspective of uh, an expert, right? So what does my buyer doubt about themselves? What have they previously failed to complete? What simple action can they successfully complete first? What early result would make them say, gosh, I can do this? And how quickly can I help them experience that result? Can I help them on a webinar? Can I help them in a text? Can I help them on a DM? Can I help them in a live event? How quickly can I help them experience that? And so before the first win, they hope they can do it. But then after you help them get that first win, they know they're doing it. And so that's the belief. So when you talk about this internal belief that they have, this internal struggle that your prospects have, your job is not to tell them that their internal belief is illegitimate. It's to validate that internal belief and say, hey, let's help you get a first win. And then that is going to knock down that internal belief. So inside your program, when you're selling something, what I like for you to do is I like for you to figure out like what that first win looks like and ask yourself, what do I have in my program that delivers that first win for them? Okay. Or delivers a measurability for the win so they know that they can do this. Name that, frame that, sell that. The second type of limiting belief that they're obviously going to have is what we call external. Okay, external. So the external limiting belief that they're running themselves through simultaneously while you're talking is will this work? Will this work for me? Okay, and not even just like your product, but like whatever it is that you're teaching, okay? And so will this work for me or will it help my cause? Will it advance my cause is sort of how I like to say. So in here, some external objections sound like things like, my market is saturated or nobody's buying right now. I was up here, I'm up here in British Columbia right now, and I was talking with someone the other day, and they're completely paranoid about going to the United States because of, what's happening in the United States. And so they've got this idea that like if they cross the border to the United States, they're gonna get arrested and gonna spend the rest of their life in prison. And that's a huge deal right now. And so one of the things that I was trying to explain to them is like that's a limiting belief that you have created in your own mind. That is simply not reality. But you're making all these excuses for why you cannot come to the United States, but meanwhile, you have millions and millions of people in your own country that you're not reaching out to as well. And so what I'd like for you to do is like not ask whether this is going to work for you because you can't get to the United States, but ask yourself, while I'm waiting to enter the United States, what can I do to be able to do that? So they're going to give you these internal biases of my market is saturated, nobody's buying right now, the economy is bad, I don't have an audience. Maybe they're saying like advertising is too expensive, or you just don't get it. My industry is different. Or, my schedule's too unpredictable, or Chad, you don't know me. My team is not going to cooperate. My family situation makes this difficult. Whatever it is, they're coming up with some things. And so the the point I want to show you here is the buyer may believe they can do the work while doubting the environment will respond. Okay. Let me say that again. The buyer may believe they can do the work while doubting the environment will respond. So they may have overcome the internal belief and said, "Okay, I can do this." But now their doubt is, "I'm not sure anyone will buy this." They're not 100% sure their environment will respond. It reminds me of a gal that I was talking to down in Florida here a few weeks ago, and she just started a GLP-1 company. And so she started this thing. She got the doctor. She did all the stuff. And what's interesting is she was like, I've proved to myself that I can get this business up and running. She goes, but I have serious doubts that anybody will ever buy from me. And I was like, well, that's a big deal. If you don't think the environment's going to respond, chances are they won't, right? So what you need to do here is you need to resist the temptation to respond to external doubts with encouragement. Yes, I said that. Okay. Do not respond to external doubts with encouragement because that doesn't help. So, for instance, if you say, "Hey, there's buyers everywhere," or "just believe in yourself," or "the people are always buying," or "you only need one client," you start saying that, that's not good. Okay. Encouragement is not a mechanism. Okay. So, what you want to do here, the solution that you're trying to do here, is you want to show the buyer where the opportunity exists and how the process works with imperfect conditions. Okay. So, what you want to do here is you want to tell them that it works in spite of imperfect conditions. Okay. In spite of this imperfection, your program can definitely still work, right? Okay, so what you want to do is you want to show them like how to identify like one specific buying pocket. Okay. Or you want to help them like find the trigger that makes the problem urgent, or you want to help them maybe find like a list of qualified prospects, or you want to help them figure out a way how to lead with value, or you want to help them like measure responses and conversations. Okay. So what you want is you want to understand that market saturation, if that's their issue, does not necessarily mean there's no opportunity. Okay, so when you look at the big things, right? So the three big markets is health wealth relationship, right? Health wealth relationship. And those may seem like red, bloody markets to us, like, they're completely saturated, and they're probably right. They are saturated. But saturation doesn't necessarily mean there's no opportunity. It may mean that it could mean that, great, people are already spending money in your market. Wonderful. That means you don't have to re educate the population. The goal is not to find a market without competition. The goal is to become more relevant to a specific buyer. So what you want to do if market saturation is their big objective, then you want to show them the more relevant you become, the more specific you become, the more you stand out in that in that field, in that market. So this is why less is more. Just become known for one thing. So like for instance, so here's a broad example. So a broad example would be like I do leadership coaching, or I do relationship coaching, or I do fitness coaching. That's broad. Okay? Uh that's breathing into market saturation. The reason is because there's tens of millions of people that are teaching leadership coaching. Okay? But you want to get specific. So, like for instance, leadership coaching for newly promoted managers now leading their former peers. Okay, that's specific. Hey, if you just got promoted to manager and now you're leading your former peers, I got a program for you. Ah, see, that's so much different because it's not just leadership; it's going specific. Let's say that you're doing weight loss. If you say, hey, I help people lose weight, well, that's very broad. That's very market saturated. But if you can get specific and say, I do weight loss for executives who travel 3 weeks each month, well, I'm going to hire you first and foremost because that's me. But that's very, very, very specific. Another broad one would be like, I do business coaching. Okay. Well, what the heck does that mean? Business coaching. Lots of people do business coaching. A specific would be something like, I offer development for experts with an audience, but no premium offer, right? So, hey, I work with experts who have an audience, but they don't have a premium offer, or their offer is not irresistible. Baby, you're my guide, right? And so, what you want to do is you want to help them. Let me show you how to get a first win for these guys. So, remember, as we said in the internal world, your goal is to help them get a first win, and it will knock down that belief. Well, it's not all that different with the external belief, okay? So, for instance, like if you can get them their first qualified reply, or their first book sales call, or their first workshop registration, or their first deposit, or their first successful week during travel, like losing weight, or they can get their first team member adopting a process, or they get their first measurable buying signal, whatever it is. If they get that first win, now they believe that, okay, I can do it. Okay, I can do this and it will work for me. And those are the two questions you're trying to answer. So here's some external belief building questions that you as a coach need to be able to answer, because these are the questions that they're asking subconsciously. So you need to figure out, what outside condition does my buyer believe will stop them? Where does the opportunity for them currently exist? What is going to make the problem that they face urgent right now? How will the client access the opportunity? Here's another one. What external signal could they produce quickly? Like if they're doing sales, right? What evidence would prove the market or environment is responding? These are the kinds of things that you want. So internal evidence says I can act. External evidence says my action is creating a response. Are you with me? So if the internal one is they're asking the question, can I do this? So your job as a coach is to come in and help them get a first win so they can say, okay, I can do this. I can make this happen. And then you need to give them external evidence to knock down the external pillar, which is, will this work for me? And then what you need to show is like, my action is what creates a response. And that's what you're looking for. It doesn't matter if you're a relationship coach or a health coach, fitness coach, or whatever type of coach. You want to get them a first win, followed by something that they can do, some action that they can take that will knock down that second one. So now let's go to the third pillar. Okay, let's go to the third pillar. The third pillar is what we call the vehicle. Okay, the vehicle. So if the first two pillars were emotional, this one is very logical. So what they're asking is, so if in the external pillar they were asking, will this work? This is the wrong thing. So not for me. This is will this work in my situation, or will this help my cause? Okay, this one is where they're coming in on this one, and they're asking, okay, will this process or this person, okay, will this process or this person work for me? Or or are they a are they a right fit? So these are the questions that they're asking here, okay? And it's sort of like dating a little bit. Like, when you go on a date, like you're looking for the person and you're like, okay, I'm going to go out, okay, and you're asking, okay, is this person the right fit for me? Well, what they're doing here is they're subconsciously creating some objections, and here's what those look like. So they're going to have objections like, I've purchased programs before, or courses don't work, or coaching is too vague, or I've tried this strategy already and it didn't work for me, or I'm afraid I will get lost, or you just don't get me. Like, you don't understand. My situation is so different, or, I need more support than what you're offering. Or they may be asking, like, how is this different from everything else that I'm seeing? And what I want you to know and understand is the vehicle, your program, is not the delivery format. It's not like your 12-week program, or your weekly Zoom calls, or your membership site, or your private community, or your workbook, or that's not the vehicle. Those are just the delivery formats for your vehicle. That explains where the work happens, but that does not explain how the results come. So you need to make it to where your vehicle is not the deliverables, but your vehicle is the result. And your job is if you can convince them that I can do this, okay, this, my action produces results, and then your program is what's going to allow me to get the result faster or better. Then when you knock that down, then you're great. So the vehicle is the method, or the sequence, or the milestones, or the decisions, or it's the implementation process. The vehicle is the way you handle objections, or the way progress is measured. Okay. That's what the vehicle is. And so the mistake that you can make in your coaching program is giving the process a clever name without making the process visible or obtainable. Okay. Let me say that again. The mistake that you can make is if you give your process a clever name. So, for instance, I have the pointer system inside my program. Okay, well, it's clever, makes sense. But if I give it just a name, but I don't show them why this is going to help them, then they are going to be left to their own intuition to connect the dots. And that's always a negative thing. It's never a positive thing. Very few people come and say, you know what, Chad, you did a crappy job explaining your program, but I want it anyway. Nobody says that. By the way, I'm up in Canada and the World Cup is going on. So these Coke Zero glasses, they're the FIFA cans, which I really like. Pretty cool. Thought I'd share that with you. But you got to be able to give your process a clever name, yes, because that's sticky. But you also have to make the process visible. So a named mechanism still needs something. Like, so for instance, so for me, I'm like, okay, we have the pointer system, but like, let's get you on stages. Okay. Um, like stage one is like minimum viable product. Okay. Then stage two is creating an offer. And then stage three is like creating an irresistible, or excuse me, an internal launch. Like stage four, like I try to create a stage so they could see that they can go into it. And then in their mind, they can say, okay, when I'm in this stage, this happens. When I'm in this stage, this happens. When I'm in this stage, this happens. And so they don't have to buy into the whole program. They just have to buy the idea that if they're in a stage, if they're in a clear stage, and we can get them in that stage, ah, then the likelihood of them buying is greater. If you don't have a clear stage, then you definitely need a logical sequence. Step one, followed by step two, followed by step three, followed by step four. What's the difference between a stage and a sequence? A stage is who they become when they graduate to that next level. So for instance, so with my pointer system, like the minimum viable product, I now am an entrepreneur who owns a minimum viable product. Then we move them into the offer. We say, now I own a minimum viable product and I have a stupidly irresistible offer. And then when we move next stage, they're like, I have a minimum viable product, I have a stupidly irresistible offer, and I have two stages that I'm going to launch this on with my internal audience, right? So we've got that. So we've got clear stages. We have a logical sequence. The third one is defined milestones. Okay, defined milestones. Um, they got to be able to know there's a win. Okay, and then there's going to be some predictable failure points. So you're going to have to be able to go in there and talk with them about where they get the support at that particular thing. Okay. So the mistake that you could make, and I want you to be really careful with this. The mistake that you can make here is, let me see if I can make this smaller. The mistake that you can make here is by giving this a cute name without making it visible or without making it possible, so to speak. You got to give them the process. So what you want to do here, so just as the internal, you're going to give them a win, and external, you're going to help them figure out that it works in spite of imperfect conditions. Okay, what you're going to do right in here is you're going to come in here and you're going to make like the process visible and logical. So you're going to avoid the temptation to talk about how many coaching calls they get or how many Zoom calls they get, all that good stuff. You're just going to simply show them that in order to get the result, there's 4 stages that you have to go through. And if you go through these 4 stages and you become something, then the likelihood of you getting the result is much greater. Okay. And so, like for instance, I will say the first stage you have to do is we have to create a product, a minimum viable product, one that's ugly, one that you can get up and running and launch so we can vet the market. And then we need to help you create an irresistible offer. This irresistible offer is going to be so irresistible that people feel stupid saying no, and you'll feel completely empowered to keep it on the marketplace. And third, we need to make some money, and we're going to do that through an internal launch. Okay. And here's exactly what we do and how we do that. And if we do those 3 things, you're going to be well on your way to making 6 figures. Okay, and that's just the first 3 steps of my pointer system, right? And so what you want is I've given them a process, but it's visible and logical, so they can see it. Okay, so let me give you like some examples of this concept. Okay, so some examples here would be like the vehicle example would be like stage one would be like build the offer. Stage two would like validate the offer through real conversations. Stage three would be convert the strongest response into enrollment, that type of thing. So what you want to do is in addition to showing them what's next, you also want to go and show them why what they did before did not work without blaming the buyer. Okay. So something like that I use inside my program is things like, but to be brutally honest with you, you did not fail because you were incapable. You were trying to market before the offer was clear. So that's why we use a beta launch for creating a prototype, because we can, you know, take the offer to market even before it's done, and you can figure out with very little time, very little energy, and very little money, whether it's good or not. You could say something like, you did not fail because you lack discipline. The plan that you were on to lose weight just could not survive because of your schedule. Or you could do something like, hey, you did not fail because nobody wanted the results. Your offer was just too broad, and so nobody knew it was for them. You could say something like, you did not fail because coaching in itself never works. You received information without implementation support, right? So you got all the knowledge and you got all the information, but nobody ever grabbed you by the hand and showed you how to do that, right? So what that does is that's answering a very logical frustration with a logical result. So here are some predictable failure points that I want you to think about, okay? Things that you know that your audience struggles with the vehicle more than what they're letting on. Okay. These are some things that you can put in your arsenal and you can learn. Okay. If your prospect consistently overthinks, or they change directions repeatedly, or they're avoiding sales conversations, or they're waiting for something like a website, or they're consuming information consistently, but they're not implementing, or they lose momentum quickly, or they get overwhelmed with too many choices and I just don't know what to do. That's a really good sign that your audience is struggling with the vehicle, and those are the internal subconscious failure points that they believe they're going to have with yours. Okay, and so some things that you can put inside of your process that will help that are things like live implementation, like decision deadlines, like checklists, demonstrations, things like feedback, weekly checkpoints, progress tracking, conversion reviews, adjustment based upon results, milestone-based guarantees, those are things that are more likely to knock that particular pillar down, okay? And so how do you know if they have now got the vehicle belief? Okay. Um, Here are the questions they'll ask. What has my buyer already tried? Why did the approach fail? What are the stages of my process? Why are they in that order? Where do clients normally get stuck? What support have I placed at those points? How is progress measured? And what milestone can I protect or guaranteed? Those are the questions that you're trying to figure out because that's really where the juice is, right? If you know what your buyer's already tried and you know what did that approach or why did that approach fail, then you're well on your way to being able to have some solid answers to overcoming that limiting belief. You can actually put that in your presentation and you can answer the question way before it's asked. And so the buyer does not need every detail. They simply need to see the pathway and the road to a win. Okay. And in fact, if you um, give them everything, the chances of you overwhelming them is probably going to be great. Okay, so let me recap here. Let me recap this for you. Okay, so here's the complete belief stack. So what you want your audience to do is instead of saying, "Can I do this?" you want them to say, "I can do this." So you're going to build that with a simple starting point, a quick win, relevant proof, and evidence of personal capability. Okay. The external one, the question they're asking is, will this work in my situation? You want the answer to be, yes, this can and probably will work in my situation. And the way you build that belief is you um, have a defined buying pocket, like a visible opportunity, real world adaptability, and some kind of early external signal that's letting them know, okay, I got this. On the vehicle, the question they're asking is, will this process or person work for me or are they the right fit? Okay. The answer that you want, the belief that you want them to say is yes, this process can and probably will get me there. And you're going to build that with some kind of visual method, a logical sequence, support at failure points, milestones, and accountability. Okay. That's what you're going to do because your offer is only as strong as its weakest belief. So a buyer may believe that the process works, but it's not for them. A buyer may believe that they can do the work, but there aren't any buyers. A buyer can believe that buyers exist, but the program feels generic. A buyer can believe that the result is valuable, but the path feels risky. So, what you need to do is you need to diagnose which belief in your current offer is missing and make sure that you have something in your presentation, make sure you have something in your marketing, make sure you have something in your methodology, and have something in your program to be able to not just knock down those limiting beliefs like a domino, but to rebuild the belief that you're trying to knock down. Because buyers buy from built belief, they don't just buy from a limiting belief knocked down.